We come now to what I think is going to be a very lively and possibly a somewhat contentious session, which is our panel discussion on regulatory data and consumer choice. Now, in a moment, we're going to have Jane Malcolm, who's the SRA Executive Director, External Affairs, to introduce that session, to give us some more detail on the new SRA discussion paper launched by Paul Phillip this morning. But just before we do that, can I just bring on our other panellists? So can I ask Matthew Briggs, Dr. Michelle Goddard and David Willis to take a seat up here, and I will give you the audience a more detailed introduction of all of you in a moment or two. But before that, please welcome Jane Malcolm.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning all. My name is Jane Malcolm. I'm the Executive Director of External Affairs at the Solicitors Regulation Authority. And it's a real pleasure to be here this morning to talk to you about regulatory data and consumer choice. As Paul said just about an hour ago, we've just launched a discussion paper on this area. Normally, when talking about our publications, I would ask people to put up their hand saying if they've read it. I think you've all been a bit busy over the last hour, so that would seem a little bit unfair. So, what's all this about? What's the challenge? What's the problem that we're trying to resolve? Fundamentally, this is around unmet need. I think we're all familiar with the figures. We know that only 1 out of 10 people who have a legal need actually go to see a regulated professional. Only 1 out of 10 small business thinks that solicitors are affordable for them, provide value for money for them. There's been a huge amount of research in this area, some from us, some from the Competition and Markets Authority, and of course the Legal Services Consumer Panel itself. Conclusion is that for most people, legal services are seen as difficult. They're in the too difficult category, difficult to access, difficult to afford. That's a real challenge. Unmet need is really important to us as a regulator. We're doing various things around that, opening up a healthy, competitive legal market, providing affordable services, keeping a firm downward pressure on prices, on the cost of compliance, on our own costs, so that that can be passed on to consumers. And we're actively supporting firms who are looking at innovative ways of providing new affordable legal services, not least through our SRA Innovate initiative. But we have to do more work to help people to actually find the services they need, to provide the information that they need. And of course, behind every great challenge, there's an opportunity, and there's a real opportunity here. About 5 million small businesses steadily rising in the UK. Every year, about 4 of those businesses have about 4 legal challenges, legal issues that they need to resolve. My maths is terrible, but that sounds like an awful lot of business. There's 46 million adults in England and Wales. I've already touched on the figures, the number of them who actually use a regulated professional. Again, that's an absolutely huge market out there. Freeing up that market, accessing that market is good for the economy. It's certainly good for the public and small businesses, but it's also potentially really good for the profession. So what kind of information do people want to help them get out there and find the legal services that they need? Once again, lots of research on this from several organisations. Conclusion is it's these types of information, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of them in a moment. What strikes me is that these are the sort of pieces of information that we'd all be looking for if you're looking for any kind of professional service. And I'm getting some building work done at home, and I've just been out looking for an architect, and this is exactly the type of thing that I was trying to find. And frankly, it wasn't that easy, and it's certainly not easy in our sector. And I think there's a question there around where people go to actually find the information that they need. And we know that the regulator is seen as an authoritative, credible source of objective information. I think perhaps the other point on this is, are all clients the same? We know they're not. Are their needs for information different? And we've put the question up here about what corporate clients would be looking for in selecting the firm to provide them with the services that they need. So looking at this in a little bit more detail, the paper that we've launched this morning sets out some of the options and looks at it under 2 sets really. what is appropriate for the regulator to be publishing, what additional information is out there, where should people get that from, should that be the regulator. So we've picked up some areas here that we're already doing some work on, basic regulatory data. We have a law firm search that we put out there earlier this year. It's already one of the most visited areas of our website. Enforcement action. We do publish on our solicitor check mechanism an opportunity for people to go and find out about what one might loosely call disciplinary action. But we don't make it easy for people to find. People have to look in several places, and that's really difficult for people. Complaints data. We collect in first-tier complaints data from yourselves. What do we do with that? Is that something that we should be putting out there? That's a real challenge. To provide that sort of information, you'd have to make it meaningful, provide context for people. In our discussion paper, we're saying, this is difficult stuff, let's have a conversation about what that would look like. And we're also talking in our paper around insurance claims. We once again collect information in from law firms on this. As Paul mentioned, we've got a session later on this afternoon around professional indemnity insurance. Huge subject. I don't think Crispin would forgive me if I didn't remind you all we're doing that this afternoon, so do stay for that and get involved in that conversation. I think one of the key challenges in all of this is what we might call getting into the Goldilocks zone. How can we provide the right amount of information without providing so much that it's actually confusing for people? And how can we balance the combination of potential benefit for businesses, the public, people trying to access services, and the burdens, the potential burdens and challenges that might place on firms and the profession. There's an awful lot to think about there. We're also talking about additional information, the sort of information that's actually already published out there in some places. Some law firms already publish this kind of material, for example. And we're questioning in the paper how much of this should be out there and who should be providing it. And of course, the most contentious one on this is the third bullet point. This is around pricing information. And lots of law firms put that information out there, but is there enough of it? And we know that the Legal Services Consumer Panel and other organisations really want to see clarity around that. And of course, service delivery, the bottom one there, very much standard practice for you all in your firms, I would expect. If you practice in North Wales, you'll want to let your clients know that you speak Welsh, for example. So next steps. We're considering going out for consultation next year. You'll see we mentioned that in our discussion paper. We are talking about whether we further develop law firm search, that basic check tool that I mentioned earlier that really just allows people to check the details, contact details of the firm and whether they're authorised by us, whether we can bring that together with our solicitor check mechanism and actually develop the proper sort of digital register that is usual practice in so many professions. And if we were to develop that type of digital register, we're suggesting doing it incrementally, that we could build something that's got space to add information in as that information became available, or if there was a consensus in the middle of this big conversation, it was desirable to include that type of information. And of course, just a reminder that we already provide information from our law firm search mechanism to the emerging data comparison websites in the legal sector. Comparison websites hugely used. We all use them, I'm sure, when we're looking for insurance products, financial products, that type of thing. But really almost barely existing in our sector, although delighted to say we've got Matthew with us and we're beginning to see some sort of green shoots of that type of thing. So finally, we really want to hear from you. Do get involved, read our discussion paper when you've got a minute. We're looking for comments on it and input, ideally before the 26th of January next year. We've got all the usual website stuff. Please get involved. We need to work with you. We need to work together to get this right. That will bring real benefit for the public, for the economy, and we think for the profession. Thank you very much.